All right. Now we're going to test. All right. In fact, since you can already see me on the room one, to get us more screen real estate, I am going to turn off my video on this because you'll still be able to see me and it will give us, I think, oh, can I hide me outright? Oh yeah. Yeah, I can remove my tile. So let's do that. Okay. Although I still see it over there. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, it's gonna still show me up there, but that's okay. All right, go. Let's see how the live stream is looking. Okay, let me see how the audio sounds. Okay. Real estate. All right. All right, just one second. I'm not going. All right. We may get a little bit of audio feedback, but I am going to try to test to see how the audio sounds. Are we? Okay. I determined what I needed to determine, which is that it is mixed acceptably. So, and don't worry, I'm sure somebody will tell me if they do not like how we're doing it. We may get a little bit of audio
They're good at that.
feedback, but I am going to very good at that. See how the audio sounds. Okay. So I think you're pretty set. So yeah, and if you basically, if you know the drill here, what I will probably do
what I needed to determine
is I do a little spiel where I tell people here in the room and online what's up, and then I want to turn it over to you.
Perfect.
Okay. So I think you're pretty set. So yeah, and if you basically, if you know the drill here, what I will probably do
what I needed to determine
is I do a little spiel. Yeah, I was out of town last week, and so I've been like, I don't have enough time to prepare for this. Please, nothing go technically wrong. I think we're gonna get lucky here, maybe.
Perfect.
Okay.
Nice.
So I think you're pretty set. So yeah, and if you basically, if you know the drill here, what I will probably do
what I needed to determine
is I do a little Okay. spiel. Yeah, I was out of town last week, and so I've been like, you're more important, so I'm gonna actually try to move
wrong.
your thingy here, maybe.
Perfect.
Over here, can I do that?
So I
Cool.
you're pretty set.
Let me-
So yeah, and if you basically, if you know the drill here, what I will probably
Meet
what I
the
needed to
mysteries of
determine
meat.
I do a little spiel.
Yeah, I was out of
Let's
town
see,
last week.
tools,
No, I don't.
You're
more important, so I'm gonna actually try to move
wrong.
your thingy here, maybe. Over here, can I do that?
So I cool. You're pretty set.
Let me-
So yeah, and if you know the drill here, what I will probably
Meet the mysteries of meat.
I do a little spiel.
Yeah, I was out of
Let's
town last week.
tools,
No, I don't.
Just
more
important.
All right. This will work. If somebody complains, we'll tweak it. So yeah, I'll probably I'll give it 3 or 4 more minutes for people to filter in, and then we'll get going.
Cool. No rush on my end.
Cool. Just all right. This will work. If somebody complains, we'll tweak it. So yeah, I'll probably I'll give it 3 or 4 more minutes for people to filter in, and then we'll get going. There we go. And I just pinned you, so you'll have a more prominent view in the stream because you matter more than I do. If somebody complains, we'll tweak it. So yeah, I'll probably I'll give it 3 or 4 more minutes. Maybe I need to tweak. Okay, actually, I know what's going on. I need to tweak my OBS screen. That's what's going on. Okay, you'll have a more prominent view in the stream. Why is it more than I do? There we go. I was like, why is it cutting that off? There we go. So yeah, I'll probably boom. Yeah, clearly I don't live stream for a living. I'm just a nerd figuring it out. That's what's going on.
OBS, even if you do it for a living, let me tell you, OBS will always cause issues at some point or another.
It's a miraculous piece of tech. I remember somebody was like, "Oh man, you're doing a video call and you're going to capture and stream it at the same time. It's not going to work." And then I'm like, "No, it worked flawlessly." So it's incredible software, but yeah, sometimes I'm like, "Wait, what?" It's a miraculous piece of tech.
It's powerful, but it's not the easiest to
doing
always
the
use
video
editing.
call and I have not even tried to like do compositing with like fancy backgrounds and stuff.
It's incredible software.
I haven't either.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like,
What?
alrighty,
It's a
so
miraculous piece of
yeah.
tech.
It's
I
powerful.
remember
we
somebody-
actually already have a
It's
decent
not
crowd
the
in here
easiest
at least,
to
so I will probably go ahead and I get ready and do my little intro spiel and then fancy background. Turn things over to you.
Incredible
Perfect.
software.
I haven't either. It's
Yeah,
gonna.
sometimes I'm like,
No problem.
what?
Alrighty,
It's a
so
miraculous
It's
piece of
yeah.
tech.
it's powerful.
We actually already have a
It's
decent
not
crowd
the
in here
easiest
at least,
to-
so I will probably go ahead and I get ready and do my little intro spiel and then fancy background. Turn things over to you.
Incredible
Perfect.
software.
I haven't either. It's
Yeah,
gonna.
sometimes I'm like,
No problem.
what?
Alrighty,
It's a
so
miraculous piece of
yeah.
tech.
It's powerful.
We actually already have a decent crowd in here at least, so I will probably go ahead and I get ready and do my little intro spiel and then fancy background. Turn things over to you. What I need. Okay, and yeah, I probably the view will be a little wonky of where I can't address you and the stream very well. I can't address the room and the stream very well at the same time, so this will be a little wonky for a sec. So yeah, anybody watching online, this is my in-person spiel. This will get less awkward in a second. We're still learning. Okay, and yeah, I probably the view will be a little wonky of where I can't address
Yeah,
you
that's
and
sort of
the
okay.
stream
If I
very
stand
well.
here, I
can't
think
address
I
the
can sort
room
of do both.
and the stream
Okay.
very well at the same time, so this will be a little
Welcome
wonky
everyone
for a
to
sec.
the latest
So yeah,
monthly
anybody watching
installment of the
online, this is my
EFF-Austin
in-person
meetup.
spiel. This will get
Welcome
less awkward
everybody to
in
the
a
room, and
second.
the few
We're
of you
still
watching
learning.
online,
Okay.
welcome.
And yeah,
For those of you
probably the
who
view
I
will
see,
be a little
see
wonky
old new
where
faces,
I
welcome
can't
all. To those
address
of you who
yeah,
are new to our
that's
meetups
sort
and
of
like,
okay.
what is
Stand
EFF
here, I
Austin?
think I can
Well,
sort of do both.
as you might
Very
guess
well
from the
at the same
name,
time, so
it
this
is
will
an
be a little
Austin
awkward for a
based,
sec.
which
So yeah,
is a
anybody
living
watching
organization.
online,
We
this
work
is
closely
Reactive,
with Electronic
welcome
Frontier
to
Foundation
the room
based
and
out
the
of
few
San
of you watching
Francisco.
online. Welcome.
They're the nation's oldest and largest digital civil liberties advocacy group. Think of them as the ACLU for the internet. They work to protect your rights in those new technological spaces, especially your First Amendment rights to free speech and expression and your implicit Fourth Amendment rights to privacy. They work on issues like net neutrality, data encryption, Section 230 of the CDA, and just generally try to make sure that the laws governing our technology are good for us and not bad for us. They're very awesome people. They're working on a lot of very relevant current issues that are being legislated all over the country. I encourage you to go to their website to learn more. As I said, we are EFF-Austin. We are a legally distinct org, but we're closely tied up in the founding of EFF because some of the people who founded EFF were we're the oldest member of what is called Legislative A, or the Electronic Frontier Alliance. This is a group of about 100 nonprofits all over the United States. All of us with religious identities. It's kind of a form of peer-to-peer activism where we all tend to advocate on similar issues. EFF primarily focuses on federal legislation or stuff going on in California, so they do try to spotlight major issues in other places. Most of the other EFA members focus on city and state issues. But yeah, we've been around about 35 years, and for a long time, we're the oldest member of the EFA, and for a long time, weirdly, despite there being 100 EFA groups, we're not only the only one in Austin, we're the only one in Texas. So recently, we're happy to welcome fellow Austin organization Open Austin to the EFA as well. Anywho, let's see. So basically, it was going over here. So our work is primarily educational. It usually happens the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. here at Capital Factory. We hear from a variety of speakers. Next month, we're going to be hearing from Stephen Apodaca, who is the head of the Austin Technology Commission, to talk to us about the commission and what it does. So that should be a fun one. I encourage you to check that out. November, we're going to have Aslan French talking to us about how, with the assistance of AI, how he actually created his own programming language despite no formal training. So that sounds pretty neat. I look forward to seeing what he creates. So join us for that. Should be a fun one. We also do some activism like bigger EFF at the city and state level. We were involved in discussions and feedback both around Texas's big data privacy law a couple sessions ago and the big AI bill from this session. Also locally, We've been very involved in the debates and also on license plate readers. In fact, we're one of about 30 groups that is in a anti-ALPR coalition. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to, I think it's noALPR.org session. You want to learn more locally, but while we have actually successfully gotten Austin to not renew its swap contract, of course, we're sitting on about 30 groups to bring it back again. Of course, anti-ALPR coalition. If you want to get involved in efforts to keep our city council from bringing surveillance into our city, I encourage you to go check out the coalition website and learn more. We've also been known to occasionally during South by or the holidays throw parties when we can find supportive tech people with money to spare. So if you want to get involved in efforts to our city council parties, we'll do this. Anyway, that's the whole spiel about us. And I guess before I introduce our speaker and turn things over to him, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share with the community? The self-promotion is totally fine as long as you think it might be of interest to the parties. Fine. Anyway, just always want to throw a spotlight on any of our space that people in town are doing. So, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce this month's speaker. Very honored to be joined here by Henry Fisher. Henry Fisher is the founder and CEO of Techlore, an educational platform dedicated to teaching digital rights, privacy, and security to millions of people on YouTube and other platforms. Henry's work focuses on making privacy education accessible to everyone, from beginners to experts, while advocating for digital sovereignty and open source solutions. So, yeah, Henry's basically going to be giving us a talk called The Privacy Journey from Reactive to Strategic. Basically, not to speak for Henry, I'm about to turn this over to him, but my understanding is that Henry very much accessible to every practical approach to privacy. This is not a presentation saying that unless you're running the most obscure Linux distro, you're not doing privacy right. This is about how can you interact in a world that frequently forces you to use services that are constantly spying on you. What can you do practical steps to protect your privacy while still existing in society? So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Henry. The most obscure Linux
Yes. Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. I know it's awkward to do the whole remote thing. Great. Thank you. It's really awesome to be here. I have a huge amount of respect for the EFF, and I know it's not formally the EFF, it's the EFF-Austin, but you guys are still, you're still wearing the EFF shirt there, Kevin. Hello, everybody. You're still representing the values, and so for me, it's all the same. And the US just wouldn't be the same, and it wouldn't be the same kind of digital space without the EFF. So thank you all for what you're doing. So yeah, today I wanted to talk about a little bit of my journey. It's a bit weird being in my situation a lot of times because I talk a lot about helping others and educating them, and I sometimes share my story, but it's a bit ironic talking about privacy as somebody who wants to stay private but needing to share my story to others. And so this is one of those moments where I share a little bit more about my personal journey, since it feels a little bit more intimate, and of course tying it into broader issues that I hope are good takeaways for you all. So Kevin already said a bit of this, so I won't spend too much time on it. If you know Nathan Bartram, who I think also goes to the EFF-Austin and is on your board, him and I co-host a podcast called Surveillance Report. We do weekly news each week, and it's something we've been doing for several years now, and we have a really committed audience of people who like to keep up with all those data breaches and privacy news, and I've been doing content like this for over 10 years now. So I've gone on the journey of I'll get to that story, I guess. So I want to start by just differentiating something, which is privacy paranoia versus privacy strategy. And so this is going to be kind of the big topic today, is differentiating what those two things are, how to know what you are doing, and also how to make sure you're on the right path, which is a privacy strategy. It's going to lead to the best long-term success. Because I would argue that even if the short term, you'd be better off by taking things to the extreme with your privacy, I would say in the long run, you're probably going to end up falling behind. So most people who kind of learn about privacy fall into the first camp because it's overwhelming. You start learning about all the surveillance technologies out there, and they feel like there's so much you can't control. It's so out of your toolbox, and you want to instantly take all that control back. But I am going to show you and kind of share my journey as to why that's not always the case, and how there's a more balanced approach to still accomplish this same thing. So the solution to all of this is to have a journey that requires more planning than execution, but there's a lot of nuances here, and so let me go ahead and just kind of touch on my story a little bit here. So, way back, I read Kevin Mitnick. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Kevin Mitnick, the author. He, I believe, passed now, so, rest in peace. I hope I didn't just make up the fact that he passed, but I'm fairly certain he passed, unfortunately. But he was a really good author, and he wrote a lot about the surveillance that was going on around the world, and he talked about a lot of the programs. He covered a lot of what Snowden was talking about, but he also touched on tools and ways to protect yourself. And he's known as a hacker, and he pretty much goes through all these extreme things that he goes through to keep himself safe. And so I read this book, and it was a big eye-opener, and I really started taking a lot of this advice to heart. And so back then, it was like having multiple devices with multiple VPN services tied to each one so that they couldn't correlate the devices together, having multiple different email providers, and all of them have different use cases. They were purchased with different information, using strictly Tor browser for everything, having tons of browser extensions in my Firefox, which back then was considered best practice because you'd have 10 extensions that all protected in different ways. You have, like I said, like 6 different devices that all had multiple purposes. I had these encrypted drives where it was like an encrypted vault inside of an encrypted drive. It was just chaos. And honestly, the result was complexity without purpose. It was a lot of theater with, honestly, some of the same benefits I receive today without any of the headache. And this was, I'm going to touch more about why this part of the journey is actually important and why most people probably need to go on at least some layer of this journey. But for me, this was my early days. And I feel like a lot of people who have been in the privacy world have had a similar early day experience where they kind of have to try out all these different tools and learn what the extreme is and see what clicks and what doesn't click. So the wake-up call for me where I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This is too much. Was when I started having to spend 20 minutes each morning just to get all my devices unlocked, getting everything set up. I started losing data. And during this whole journey, I already started Techlore at this point. And so having to manage video content, video files, scripts, emails, and all this stuff while still maintaining this workflow was a very interesting challenge that made things even more difficult. And if any of you, which I'm sure most of you out there, have some kind of other commitment outside of just yourself, whether it's a job, whether it's family, friends, you're going to know that it's hard to organize all these different areas of your life. Now, add this whole privacy and security thing to the mix, and that's going to make things even tougher. So I also was having issues functioning around my friends and family. Venmo was a thing, and people always ask, how can I pay you back? And I never really had an option for them. I never had easy numbers for people to reach. People would have 4 different numbers to contact in their contact list, and they never knew which one to contact. They'd send me messages, and then I'd only find out 3 months later that they were trying to text me, and they said, why didn't you get back to me? And then I had to pretty much tell them, oh, you're probably using the wrong number. Same thing with emails. And same thing with society. This is still an issue to this day, I will say. So this problem has not gone away, but having to open bank accounts and try to be a part of things and not completely inconvenience my life everywhere. And so all of these things kind of came together, and it just got to a point where I realized nothing in my life was really working. I was spending more time managing the privacy tools than actually living privately. And so this wasn't really working for me. And I really want to stress here that this might be what some people need, right? So when I'm out here preaching that it's really hard to go to the extremes of privacy, it's not to say that nobody should do that. It's just to say that this is not realistic for a lot of people, especially if you're somebody who doesn't need that privacy. If you're in an oppressive country and your ideas and the things that you're trying to share could get you thrown in prison or killed, you're going to be doing all of these things because this is life or death. But if you're somebody who overall is just trying to take their privacy more seriously and you care about this as a human right, there are ways to still get much of this protection, but simpler. So that was my breaking point. So just to summarize what I consider reactive privacy, which is this very reactive, like, oh, there's all this stuff going on and I want to, do all these things to deal with all these problems. So I tried my best to summarize what these look like. So the first thing is fear-based decisions. So if you're constantly having to change things because there's a new headline, there's a new tool, there's this going on, and you're just like, oh, there's this stuff going on and I need to act now. If you're making more of those fear-based decisions, it's just an indicator. It doesn't mean that you're doing all the wrong stuff. It's just something to pay attention to. Same thing with tool collecting. If you realize you have tons of extra hardware, devices, software that you're really not using and they're not actually integrated into your daily workflow yet, that's also kind of an indicator that you're just kind of collecting things that aren't being used. The third one I think is a lot more telling. It's the only, well, I'd say the last two are probably the most telling ones. If you have either of the last two, I would argue something needs to change, independent of all the other ones. So if you have even a little bit of all or nothing, so if you feel like there's no middle ground, it's perfect privacy or total surveillance, this email provider is either this or that. There are some exceptions to this. I would argue Facebook is almost always surveillance for the most part, and I would argue things like the systems that EFF-Austin has been fighting are also very surveillance forward. But a lot of the solutions that aim to fix those problems are not surveillance nor perfect. They're normally somewhere in the middle. They normally address 3 out of 5 issues or 4 out of 5 issues, but a little bit more inconvenience, or maybe they transfer the issue into something else. So appreciating some more of that nuance and seeing how these tools can help and hinder you is really telling that you are not in a reactive state. And the last one is massive inconvenience. This is something else that even if you don't feel like you have any of the other three, if this one is a problem, it's a very strong tell that something is happening. It feels like nothing works, everything's slow, nothing's getting done. Basic things in my life that used to be very easy to do are no longer easy. I'm losing contact with people. I'm getting back to emails a week later. And it's not because I was traveling for a week, it's because of my workflow. So these are 4 things to pay attention to that might tell you that you are being in a reactive situation, which is fine, right? Like I've done this, most people in the privacy world have done this. And so it feels like you're drowning. That's the imagery there. And just an extension of this, something that I've been really trying to tell people lately, and it's new language I found to talk about privacy, is that privacy itself isn't an end. People see privacy as like, okay, I'm going to be private. Oh, I'm going to stop surveillance and I'm going to by becoming private, if that makes sense. So I just want to really challenge this because privacy in my mind is not an end. There's no inherent benefit to just being more private and then continuing to be more and more private. I see privacy as the journey that leads to whatever your end result is. So privacy is a means to an end. So I put some examples here. Privacy enables creativity, freedom to explore ideas, free expression, safety. It enables you guys in Austin to also have your own digital rights, digital control. It can be whatever you want. It's kind of your job, and I think everybody should reflect on privacy as a means to what. So what life do I want privacy to protect? And really critically analyzing this question. I think if more people spent more time on this question than just signing up for new tools, they'd actually get much further along in their journey. So this is how I think privacy is a human right. I think privacy in itself is a human right, but I also think that privacy should be treated as a means to an end for other things. Now, strategic privacy framework is, it's a bit complicated, and this is how I really want to make it clear that this PowerPoint is not going to detail every little step you're going to do to make yourself private and secure. This PowerPoint is more of a mindset shift that I hope can help you all really get the best advice that you can get out there. So the first thing is threat modeling, and I feel like this is shared around a lot, and it frustrates people because it's very, it just, there's not a specific way to do it. Some people recommend it doing it in different ways, but I will just keep it very simple here, which is who might want your data, what are they after, and how sophisticated are they? So if you're simply asking these questions and applying these questions to different things you're concerned about, you are in a way threat modeling. You can have tons of different systems in place to do that, but just having that established as an option is already a huge step forward. Next is risk assessment, and people really fail on this one a lot, and it's a really hard one to do, and it takes experience to know how likely something is to happen. So a really good example right now is, this has been happening actually for a few years, but there's a lot of people that talk about how different browsers have better security than other browsers. So particularly how Chromium has better security than maybe Gecko, which is the Firefox web browser engine. But these are very hypothetical security benefits, which even if they're true, we have yet to really see them pan out very much in the wild. And so it's the kind of thing where, yes, that risk is real, but what's the likelihood and the impact of that threat actually reaching you? And so this takes a bit more experience. And over time, you'll see, well, yes, these concerns are real, but we've seen in the last 5 years that nothing's actually amounted to any of those concerns. Whereas this thing over here that everybody seems to be ignoring is actually happening a lot more often than people are giving it credit for it. So a lot of these things will come with experience, but I like to at least kind of paint the picture of what it looks like for all of you, regardless of where you are in the journey. The third thing is proportional response. So you need to match your defenses to the realistic threats and not imaginary ones. So you need to look at what you're trying to protect yourself from, see what the likelihood is and the impact of each of those threats, and then you need to form responses to those threats. So, let's just do an example here, which is I want to prevent identity theft. This is something that I hope everyone in the room and everybody listening online wants to protect themselves from, and I hope that this isn't a polarizing topic either. It's not a single person I think thinks identity theft is a good thing. So, who might want your data? Criminals, cyber criminals is an extension of that. Maybe even potentially someone who doesn't like you anymore, maybe an ex. All these different things are people who could fall into the threat model of identity theft. Now, what's the risk assessment? You might ask yourself, okay, my ex and I, we ended on really good terms. I know them, intimately, and I know they would never do something like that. So that's not really a high risk for me. Maybe it's the inverse. Maybe they have been stalking you. Maybe they're giving you a lot of issues. And now that's a much more realistic threat. Then we go into the cyber criminals. We go, okay, what's the likelihood of them getting access to this information? Well, I have these 8 accounts, all of which have my social security number, and they've had like 3 incidents in the last year between all of them. So that's actually a pretty likely scenario. So I'm using hypotheticals, but this is how you should probably be asking yourself these questions. And then you have to find defenses to this. So identity theft is an easy one because all of them can be improved by just freezing your credit. But let's say your stalker X still has a key to your house. That is a very bad situation to be in, and you need to now fit that into your defense workflow. So ideally, you now change your locks as part of this. But maybe someone who doesn't have this issue never has to change their locks to prevent identity theft, which at first glance doesn't seem at all related, right? So that's why we have to go on this path, because things that might seem obvious to do to help you might not actually be helping you, but things that don't seem at all related could actually be very intertwined for a specific person. So this is what people are talking about when they say threat modeling. And then that kind of extends to section 4, which is finding and testing solutions. And this is when you're going to kind of put together what you're going to do to address those responses. You're going to find the best solution. You're going to see, okay, what's the best lock? Oh, I really like this lock, but it's really inconvenient to use, and I'm realistically never going to lock my door because of this situation. And so solutions is also very important, because you can address everything properly and still pick the wrong solutions that are too extreme or too simplistic in their protection. So I hope that gives you all a bit of a framework to help see specific threats out there. And I would love to open this up to questions at the end if you guys have any questions, because I know it's hard to get into specifics. Now, just to expand on this, does this go into the next slide? me see. I guess it doesn't. That's good. Okay, this got cut off, so I'm gonna just fill it in for you guys. So for me, real examples before and after. So before, I would have something like 5 encrypted email services. I had complex forwarding rules between all of them. Emails would get lost. I never knew where to email people from. They didn't know how to email me. I had manual aliasing that I was doing, and it was a mess. And nowadays, what I do is I just have one encrypted provider. I just set it up a simple login, and I just generate alias as a simple login. And then I have one extra thing, but it's all inside the same ecosystem. It's easy to use, and it actually improves my life. One pattern that you guys might notice to kind of indicate that you're doing things well is that privacy will actually feel like it's improving your life. Now, when I get spam, I just disable a simple login alias. That's a life improvement there, because normally, if you just use one email inbox with no aliases, you can't really stop spam. And so that is one easy improvement. It also means that when I sign up for services, they have their own dedicated email. And so if someone else starts using that email, I know that they gave my email to a third party. So that's another life improvement. And none of this actually costs me almost any convenience. And so that's when you know you're doing privacy well. Another example is phone numbers. So with a phone number, back then it was having like 5 dedicated SIM cards. I'd have to swap them in and out of my phone manually, and it was a pain in the ass. And nowadays, it's just having MySudo. MySudo is a really good tool for VoIP phone numbers, and it's great to give to people that you know. And then I still have a Google Voice number that I like to use for my accounts. But it's actually a life improvement, because now when I travel, I actually still get all of my texts because when I'm going out of country, I don't pay for an international phone plan, but I still get an eSIM that's data only, but I still get all of my texts uninterrupted, which normally isn't a thing unless you're paying your cell company extra for an international plan. So that's a very easy example of how it can actually be an improvement at times without really being a hindrance. It also means when I'm using Craigslist, I'm just giving these alias numbers to people on Craigslist, which I don't really need or care about. And I don't have to feel like they're going to do anything crazy with my phone number. Another example is payment methods. So back in the day, it was having like cash only, or going to the Target and getting these prepaid Visa gift cards that you can get with cash, and then you can use them in stores or online. And nowadays, I just use privacy.com. Privacy.com makes everything wonderful. One of my credit cards also has virtual credit cards that I can generate, and that's all inside the banking ecosystem. So it's not perfect privacy, but I'm getting the benefits that I really wanted, which is I didn't want all of my emails to be in one place, and I didn't want all of my accounts tied to just me. So my email aliasing solution nowadays fixes that problem with none of the inconvenience. My phone number situation, I didn't want random strangers to have the same phone number as the people that I care about. That issue is fixed, and in fact has improved my life in a lot of ways. And same with the payment stuff. I now have third-party protection so that random people online don't have my actual credit card number, which is the thing I cared about most. And it's actually improved my life. And one of my credit cards, my privacy.com card specifically, was caught in a data breach. And they tried charging the card, and it didn't work because it only works with that specific merchant. So that's another example of where privacy actually helped me and didn't hinder me. So to kind of extend on this, what does good privacy look like? I think for most people, good privacy can be a better relationship with technology, because you'll have more control. You have better understanding of what's on your devices. You have better understanding of what your digital life looks like, so it's not so clustered everywhere and you're just kind of, you don't know what's going on. I think it can definitely improve peace of mind. I think bad privacy can make you have less peace of mind, and good privacy can give you more peace of mind. Because you'll have stronger guarantees that your sensitive conversations are yours, your data is yours, and you're confidently speaking to the people that you should be speaking with and no one else. The third thing is better safety. I know, right? Like that is the inevitable thing that I hope is better, whether you have good or bad privacy, so that you, your data, and your loved ones are safer out there. That's, I think, a given. And the fourth is more freedom. Good privacy should enable you to have more freedom. It enables you to go on the internet and watch something and get ads that aren't personalized to you. You have that freedom to not be tied and tracked all across the internet. You also have the freedom to be yourself, to express yourself, to be creative, to create a social media account that you think is a little bit ridiculous, but you don't want tied to your personal name. That's what good privacy looks like, is you actually have the freedom to choose when you share your information with people out in the world. So kind of summarizing some common mistakes to avoid, just trying to take some of the big bullet points from everything I've shared so far. Look out for what I call fake privacy, which is things that just look better, that don't actually change anything. A good example of this, I was in uni, and there was a person next to me that was like on Facebook Messenger on their Windows computer, and they did something atrocious. I think they had, this was back when Facebook Messenger wasn't end-to-end encrypted, just so you all know. But then, they were doing everything wrong, and then they just had a little webcam cover, like to tape their webcam. And, when I see that, I go, okay, that's cool. Like, I'm happy to see someone tape up their webcam. But when you see the more likely things that are likely going wrong in that scenario versus a very much more hypothetical scenario of like a targeted attack against this person, I would consider that more fake privacy, right? Even though there can be situations where it helps that person, and I don't want to discourage that, there are other things that I wish that person took more seriously. Perfectionism paralysis. There's a lot of this out there in the privacy world and also just the world in general, where if there isn't quite a perfect solution yet, you just don't do it anyway, and you just throw your hands up. But we have to fight this urge because we all have it. We need to understand that improvements are improvements. And so even if something isn't perfect, even if it doesn't solve all of your privacy concerns, if it moves you in the right direction, it's still something that is worth doing. So try to avoid just getting stuck where you are. I also would try to take usability into account from day one. You can always try it and trial something before making a big move and see if it works for you first. But the important thing is to have a bit more mindfulness about the usability of the tools you're choosing to use. Because if it's inconvenient, you're going to stop using it and you're going to go back to where you were. And you might not try again because you got frustrated. So it's easier if you just take a step forward. And if that step goes well, you can keep taking steps forward as time goes on. This one really frustrates me, the nirvana fallacy, because I see this pretty much every day. That's part of my job of being online a lot. This tool has a problem, so it's useless. I've been seeing this a lot with the Tor browser lately. People have been really quick to poke holes in the Tor implementation. And then you say, OK, so what do I use then? And someone recently unironically said Opera browser. I got to laugh. So this is kind of my point. There's this nirvana fallacy, which is this tool has one problem, therefore it's useless. And that's just not the case. We can address issues with software, with hardware, with all of these services. It's important for us to criticize them, actually, because we need them to be as good as we can possibly make them. But that doesn't mean they're useless tools. We need to also know where we are, and we need to know that the tools we have are the tools that we have. So utilize them. And just because you find an issue with a service doesn't mean you need to avoid it outright. Also be careful with shame. There's a lot of people who will try to make you feel shame because they are doing something better than you. And this is, I think, a big tech problem in general, where it's like, oh, you use that operating system. Well, I'm on Linux and I know the CLI and I know all these commands. That's kind of embarrassing. I don't actually see that in real life very much. It's more of an internet problem. But don't fall for that, right? Like, you're on your own journey. Don't listen to other people's journeys. And the people who actually care about your journey and helping you are the people you want to surround yourself with. They're not going to make you feel that way. And then also, don't get stuck in your ways. I have to get myself out of this too, because I find a good workflow and I'm really happy with the things I'm doing. And then I kind of just stay stagnant. But the ecosystem does improve. So when I started my privacy journey, I talked about how I had all these email providers that I did use for different things. Nowadays, I think it was about 5 years ago, they released Simple Login for the first time. And it just completely changed the game. It makes it so everybody can alias things now. And now we have Apple, who's aliasing emails. We have Addy.io. We have DuckDuckGo with email aliasing. I think Brave is talking about doing aliasing if they haven't already done so. And I think, who else? AdGuard, I think, released aliasing. So now it's just kind of this mainstream tool. Mozilla has aliasing. So keep in mind that the ecosystem does improve in many core ways, and we don't have the same ecosystem that we used to have back in the day. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's gotten better. We now have cross-platform, open source TOTP apps for your 2FA codes. We didn't really have those 5 years ago. So the space really does get better, and it's important for you to notice when it is a noticeable improvement in an area of your life and make that hop, because it will make your life a little easier. And then the red flags, delete everything comments, very like, oh, yeah, you're on the internet, just delete everything. That's not helpful. It's impractical, and it's just not realistic for a lot of people. I don't need to explain that one too much. Another common thing to avoid, these are red flags, is you must use this tool. So if you have a very generic problem, like I would like my messages to be more private, they say, well, you need to use this. Anything else is compromised. That's a red flag. There are, off the top of my head, like 5 pretty decent messengers out there for privacy and security. They all do a good job with varying pros and cons, and that's kind of the language you want to see. And you want to see someone ask you, hey, well, what are you looking for in a messenger, and what are the people around you looking for in a messenger? And here are the options that you might want to check out. That's more of the advice that you might want to see. If you're not doing X, you don't care about privacy. This is some of that shaming as well, which is, oh, you're not on Linux or you're not off of Windows yet. Do you even care about privacy? What's the point of using Signal if you're on Windows? What's the point of using this? So don't fall for that, right? That's more of that shame. Just realize you're on your own journey. You might be ahead in one area and not in another area, and that's perfectly okay. And then a lot of fear mongering. So there's a lot of panicking and a lot of, oh my gosh, there's nothing to do here. But a lot of that requires context, and a lot of that doesn't have any action. A lot of things that I think do require some panic also require some action, and there's typically action involved. So try to avoid that over the fear mongering, just in itself without some kind of action associated with it. Now, I do want to add some legitimacy to my journey as well, because this is something that I don't want you all to be too safe. My journey of me going to the extremes wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was actually a part of my researching and the phases that I've gone on that led me to where I am today. So I think it's actually really important for you all to try out these tools. If you have a laptop that's Cubes compatible, go ahead and install Cubes. Have fun with it. If you have a flash drive, put Tails OS on that and boot up Tails. If you have a device and you just want to try out Briar with a friend, download Briar, the messenger, and maybe next time you're on a plane, you guys can do Bluetooth messaging together and just see how it works. You can use all these tools. So that's not the lesson here that I'm trying to give you guys. It's just that you should use them as learning experiences and figure out what the limits are and use that as research. And then I also wouldn't have understood the trade-offs that I was really making until I did the things that I did. And so now I can find the right middle ground for myself. And I gained a lot of awareness, and it's given me the ability to offer guidance to others as well. And that's something that you all can do in your lives. You don't need a YouTube channel to do it. You don't need to speak to do it. You just need to have a friend or family member who at some point has a question to give you, and you can tell them, hey, here are the typical things that you can do. I tried this one. It was a bit too much, and I think it's going to be too much for you. So I think this is the right option for you. And it makes you a better person for people to go to advice to. So key takeaways, and I believe this is my last slide before I open it up to questions. Start with a threat model. Start with actually analyzing things critically. See the tools that serve your strategy, not the other way around. Remember that perfect is the enemy of the good. Remember that other people are part of your privacy journey, that you don't live in a vacuum, and that's something that might work for you, might not work for your family, might not work for your friends, might not work for your pets. So you need to think about how it incorporates into all areas of your life and then find the right solution from there. And then when you go too far, that's okay. Make adjustments, be flexible, and be open to change, and just be mindful of the fact that you went too far and that you just need to make an adjustment. As long as you keep this journey going, it's like a staircase, right? Like you push a little bit ahead, you realize, oh, that went a little far, maybe I'll step a little bit down, and then you keep going from there. And then as a result, you end up ideally, somewhere up higher. But I try to avoid saying destination, because I said earlier in the slide, I don't want privacy to be a destination. I just want it to be something that kind of coexists with you. So there is no destination on this stair. It's just a stairway that keeps going. That's all I have. You can always contact me on my website or directly through Techlore if you want. But I'd love to answer any questions. This is something I've been doing for 10 years, so I'm really passionate about it, and I'd love to just give any advice I can give you guys. But thanks for listening.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Henry. Really useful tips. And also to everybody watching online, I'm sorry that we yet again, just like last month, had a slight audio snafu. As I was saying, it's only the second month of doing this, so we're learning in real time, but I'm happy that according to chat, we fixed it. Hooray. So hopefully you're all gonna get to hear any questions the room has for Henry here. So to the room, if you have a question for Henry, I strongly encourage you to come up to the front of the room to ask it, because the mic that lets people online hear what you said is up here. So if somebody has a question, I encourage you to come up. Who has a question for Henry? And I can kick it off if somebody does not.
Yeah, don't be shocked.
All right, well, anyway, I'll kick us off with one to start while people are maybe thinking of some questions. So I guess I'll just, out of curiosity, so what was your impetus to really like start Techlore? I mean, it's one of the more prominent privacy education channels on YouTube, and I'm just really kind of curious how it all came about.
Yeah, it came about very accidentally, actually. So I was going to school and they blocked Wikipedia at our school. And so like a lot of people in their space, actually, they actually learn about VPNs first and then kind of go from there. So I was trying to figure out how to access just a free VPN to go on our school network. And then I learned very quickly that there weren't very many tutorials on that back then. This is before like the, every YouTuber is sponsored by a VPN company era. And so they were just a more rare tool back then, and no one made a guide about it on YouTube. And so when I finally found a free VPN that actually let me access the sites on my school network, I just put a quick tutorial about it. And I posted that on the channel. And pretty much, I think I checked YouTube a few days later and it had like 4,000 views. And I was like, whoa, it's pretty crazy. Like for me, I was like, that's a lot of people. And so I just kind of kept uploading guides and tutorials. So I started doing some Linux tutorials, and I started posting more about VPNs. I started posting things about Tor. And then it wasn't until 2017 that it really started shifting to become privacy, security, etc. And then I'd say in the last few years, it's shifted more to being just broader digital rights as a whole, and kind of expanding this to be a more, just open it up to more people, I think, not just privacy and security.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll do one more and then I will recheck the room. I really appreciate you emphasizing that, there are no perfect tools, there are trade-offs, and it's really about your specific needs. I know you talked a little bit about privacy red flags in general, but at the same time, it's like, obviously there's a point at which the trade-offs stop being trade-offs and the tool is just bad for privacy. Do you have tips for people to figure that out? Like, speaking of VPNs, we all know about 95% of them are terrible. Are there broad guidelines one should be following when picking privacy tools to know, well, this isn't a matter of trade-offs, this is just bad?
Yeah, I think so. If you're ever stuck on a tool, so let's say a VPN is a good example. Let's say you're using a VPN service and you don't know if it's still worth using, if the trade-offs are there. What I like to do, and this is what I do for myself, is I look at what's around it. Where am I actually on the spectrum of bad to good? So what is the worst case scenario in a VPN example? It's maybe just using nothing. And then what's the best case scenario is I'm using Tor for everything. And then I kind of go through and I look at, okay, so now we're stuck between VPN versus VPNs. So let's say you're using Kevin VPN, and VPN is actually falling short of Mulvad, iVPN, etc.
Wait, my self-hosted WireGuard doesn't measure up? How dare you?
Yeah, let's say your speeds are bad. Let's say you're not hosting it well. Let's say it's not open source software. Let's say they got in a data breach last year. And let's say it's the same price as something like Mulvad. Then this is where a very obvious moment, and this is the upgrade moment I was kind of alluding to in the slideshow, pops up, which is, oh, there's a very clear, better tool that is cost me the same amount of money. It won't really cost me any inconvenience, and it just makes more sense to use. And so there will be a lot of moments on this journey where you'll notice, oh, okay, this just makes more sense. A good example I can give in my personal life, I used KeePass, the password manager, for a long time. I think it's a wonderful password manager. No no hate on KeyPass because they're awesome.
I still use KeyPass because I
Yeah.
don't like cloud-based except for my job where it's a necessary evil.
Yes, and it's a wonderful service, especially if you want to keep everything cloud-based. But I started using Simple Login, and then I found Proton's password manager, Proton Pass. And for me, it was that pivotal moment of it actually addressed all of my issues that KeyPass did. It is unfortunately cloud-based if you do want something fully cloud-based, but I respected the threat model, I respected their security implementation, and it has been nothing but a good move for me for convenience and security, as well as having better consistent backups on other devices. So that was a very easy example that I can give for myself. But yeah, I don't, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, it's just sort of like, well, if there's a tool that it's not trade-offs, it's just literally better than everything you're doing, that might be a sign the tool you're using is not the best out there. You
Right.
should move. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but there's something just objectively better.
Right. And it's okay when something's better. And sometimes things change in life as well. So sometimes it's not as obvious. So maybe you move somewhere and where you move has terrible internet. So a service that maybe relied on you self-hosting something, right? Like let's say you have a NAS. Now it's a lot slower to access your NAS remotely. So now maybe you need to start exploring end-to-end encrypted cloud providers for your drive storage. So sometimes things change in your life, and now you're having to do pros and cons and really making a list and saying, okay, well, let's try these out. And in those situations, if you still can't make a decision, try both things. There's very few examples I can give where you can't try a tool before moving to it. And that's something that people really don't seem to want to do for some reason, but it's very easy to just set up a browser, import your bookmarks and your history to the new browser, and just try it out and see if you like it for a few days. And if you don't like it, uninstall it and move back to what you were doing. So that's always an option as well.
Cool. Do we have room any questions for Henry? I mean, I can keep going, but I know our room can stand really great. So, yeah, you want to?
I can project maybe.
Well, and I can repeat it for the student. Okay.
Cool. I'm a public relations student at UT, and I'm going into marketing, and something that's like talked about a lot right now is targeted advertising, and I heard you mention it. I was wondering, in your education platforms, have you interacted with that concept a lot? And then if so, what are some recommendations that you give the people that you work with about like how to avoid targeted advertising?
To summarize the question for the stream, and if Henry did not fully get it, it's basically like, what are broad tips you give people about targeted advertising and how they can minimize how much they're being targeted by advertising?
Yes. So this advice always evolves because advertising gets more and more sophisticated as time goes on. I still, to this day, think you can take care of 80% of it if you're doing things inside of your browser. And within your browser, you have an ad / privacy tracker built in. I love uBlock Origin. Go ahead.
And just to clarify, maybe for the West End, we say, you mean specifically if you're on your phone, don't use an app. If you can at all use the web browser version or whatever it is, that will nuke a lot of the targeted advertising right there.
Yes. So a good example is Instagram. Instagram can be used in Safari. You can actually add it to your home screen from the browser, and that way it opens inside of your browser. And then you can combine that with a tool. uBlock Origin is now on iOS. That was a very hidden announcement as of the last few weeks. It's uBlock Origin Lite on iOS, or I still use AdGuard on iOS. And then on Android, you have similar ad blockers that you can use as well, or certain browsers like Brave just do all of this for you out of the box. On desktop, same thing, uBlock Origin, browsers like Brave. Firefox also has some nice stuff built out of the box as well, but normally uBlock Origin with Firefox will be a bit better. Now, if you have to use an app, for example, a lot of apps do this via third-party SDKs, which is essentially code that exists inside of the app that's designed to track you and submit data to third parties. And in these examples, using things like custom DNS can help a little bit. So there are services out there. A lot of VPNs actually include filters. So like Molvad does this. They have an ad tracker and malware filter that you can use inside of their service. IVPN has something similar. Proton has something similar, and I think Windscribe does. All of those VPNs allow you to essentially turn on a toggle, and it'll actually block a lot of domains that are used by applications and websites to ping and send data that you have. If you don't use a VPN, you can replicate this using just a custom DNS provider. You can use Mullvad's DNS. They have lists that you can get on their website. So type in MULLVAD custom DNS, or no, sorry, just say DNS, not custom DNS, Mullvad DNS. And you'll see a list there, and they lay out all the different DNS that you could set up on your phone. And they give you instructions, and they lay out how to set it up. Or I like Next DNS as well. Next DNS allows you to pretty much add filtering yourself. So you can do things like block all social media at 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. But it also does everything else I shared with you guys as well. I hope that wasn't too much that I just threw over audio.
Is that your question?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. Thinking about the older Americans, so most of us in the room are probably de facto check support for our parents. So my parents, 60, 70 years old, they've had their bank accounts broken into. I've lost track how many times they've had their accounts taken over. So, thinking about balancing usability and just tech literacy, as well as like some sort of like safety and privacy. What are maybe the top like 3 to 5 things I could coach older Americans, including my parents, on what they should do in the next month or so?
All right, so to repeat the question of the stream, and just depending on how much Henry got, the question is basically, for those of us who are trying to assist people in our lives, maybe older and less tech savvy, what are maybe the top 3 things we could help educate them on that would really improve their privacy and security? You're tired of your mom and dad keep coming to you saying my Facebook got hacked again. Like, what are the top 3 things for the, not necessarily technologically illiterate, but they just weren't raised in the world we now live in?
Right. It's funny because this remote thing's throwing me off because I couldn't hear you very much, and I'm like leaning in, thinking that that's going to make a difference, and it just doesn't.
It's a Frankenstein's thing we've cobbled together. We'll keep learning.
But yeah, so this is going to be really tough, and I wish I could give a very clear, direct answer. I can kind of speak to my experience as well as people in my life. It's going to depend on your family member, what they're comfortable with, and how well you know them. So I'd lean most into that. And some good examples I can give is I would really rely on tools that simplify a lot of what we're talking about as much as possible. So a really good example I can give is I think password managers are something that is really good to get people on because they're normally very easy to use. They normally take care of a lot of security for them. A lot of modern password managers actually have I been pwned integrated into the password manager, so it'll alert them if any of their data is caught in a data breach. It can even handle 2FA for them as well, which again, this is why threat modeling is important, because if I'm talking to somebody who's trying to go for max security, I might tell them, hey, keep 2FA on a separate device, keep it offline, all of that, more hardcore advice. But for them, just having 2FA on in the first place is actually going to give them a majority of the benefits. So work with them and give them tools that are very easy to use, even if they're not the tools that you might use. I recommend a lot of tools to my family members that I would never touch myself. And that's not because I'm giving them bad advice. I'm just giving them advice that they're actually likely to stick to and is overall still improving their privacy and security. And I think the best thing to do for any family member, just regardless, just install an ad blocker for them, like ad block on their browsers. I've never heard a single complaint about that one. Just show them how to turn it off if a website breaks, and then they're good to go from there. That's one that most people just universally agree on.
So what I'm hearing is your top 3 would be ad blocker, password manager, and maybe in the password manager 2FA, or teach them about a dedicated app if they're a little more tech savvy.
Sorry, yeah, I guess I forgot the initial question of 3 things. Yeah, password manager, ad blocker is also very important. And then I would even fill in that 3rd one with just more of a 30-minute presentation that you give them, educating them about phishing. I think that's probably much more important than something like 2FA is important as well. It's hard to pick between all these things, but I would really just take the time and show them what phishing attempts look like, show them common threats, and just educate them on things that they should and shouldn't reveal over the phone or over email, and all the various areas that they shouldn't be sending their data off to. That's what I would recommend.
And this is a sidebar that because you raised phishing, I'm curious. Would you recommend phishing education, or would you recommend trying to introduce them to like FIDO2 hardware keys, which make phishing impossible in theory?
So this is why, this is why I said it really depends on the family member. Because for some family members, I can completely see the FIDO thing being actually great. Like I would just set up passkeys for them, maybe even on their hardware level. So not even a dedicated YubiKey or anything, just setting up passkeys on their iPhone, passkeys on their MacBook. They're pretty much phishing resistant. They take care of most of the security for them. But for some of them, that's actually a new thing that they're going to get confused by, and they're going to go, "What is this? What's a passkey?" And they're going to get confused. And so for some people, it might not be a good idea. So you need to ask them and maybe show them what it looks like, and you know them the best, and see what works for them. But as long as you're kind of getting into these discussions with them in the first place, I think you're going to probably find a good solution. And if it's not working for them, they're probably going to let you know pretty quickly. And then you just have to find a new solution as a response to that. But I think passkeys are a wonderful thing for this demographic.
Yeah. I was just thinking because I was like, phishing education is well and good. And I think it's pretty easy to educate somebody to spot really bad phishing pages, but the really sophisticated ones that it's a perfect clone and the only tell is that it's a Cyrillic A in the URL, I might get duped. So I wouldn't blame them if they got duped.
None of us are immune to phishing. It is a thing. I'm a fan, if you're doing things a bit more securely, I'm a huge fan of using YubiKeys as a 2FA method, because then that does function as your essentially phishing resistance on top of a strong username and a strong password. But I think that's a bit beyond maybe for a family member, where I think a passkey is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
What's your question?
So, it's a more general question. So in my work, the most people I know is and I don't care about privacy because I have nothing to hide. So obviously, speak to a lot of people. So in your experience, how do you see this trend evolve, and do you see more and more people doing that function?
To repeat for the stream, I think the question is, those of us in this space who care about privacy are often used to dealing with a lot of very apathetic people who say, I have nothing to hide, I don't care. Have you seen an evolution? Have you seen more people caring about privacy? And if so, why?
I have. I definitely have. And unfortunately, people really start caring about privacy once a lot of times it's too late. Of course, I'm never going to say it's too late because I think there's always something you can do. There's always a step you can take in the right direction. But normally something has already happened and it's no longer a preventative measure and it's a reactionary measure. And so when politics are a big reason for this. So somebody that someone doesn't like is talking about passing something that would now surveil them, or it puts them in jeopardy, it puts them in the crosshairs. And now freedom of expression is at risk. And they go, well, I need to hide my browsing history. I want to be able to look something up privately. I'm worried that I'm going to be targeted, etc. So I have seen a big uptick in the last few years in people who are more concerned about this and are more concerned about repressive regimes. And a lot of these more authoritarian style people who are popping up kind of all around the world right now. So I think there is a big attack right now on freedom of speech and freedom of expression that people are very much so realizing the value of privacy a bit more. I don't know if that answers your question. It's very anecdotal because some people might have the opposite experience and they're like, people care less nowadays.
I mean, with some of the crazy laws they've been passing recently, that would be a very interesting reaction if people cared less. But I'm always prepared to be disappointed.
I'm a bit annoyed actually, because privacy has definitely made it into the mainstream, but it's been hijacked by people like Apple, who I think Apple does some good things for privacy, but they are too loud for what they offer. It's disproportionate. And so we need to kind of take back a little bit more of that privacy word, because right now, Facebook is like, we care about your privacy. Here's why you shouldn't opt out of our bajillion things we're going to do to, just screw you over. Google, all these companies have privacy in their name and are trying to really capitalize on it. But I think we should really be pushing back on that, because I think now it's confusing consumers into thinking that they care about privacy because they turn off a toggle on their account, when it's a bit more sophisticated than that.
Well, and I mean, Google literally just lost a lawsuit that, what do you know, the web and app activity privacy toggle, which a lawyer assured me must do something because they'd get sued if it didn't do anything.
Right.
And I guess, and also because you brought up Apple, I guess, once again, this kind of gets into, well, different people, different spaces. I mean, to somebody like me, Apple's not private because they secretly still log metadata on every app you open on their systems, basically. But is this a case where if you're trying to get somebody who just wants it easy and, you know, good enough, it's still an improvement on where they are? Do you think Apple is like an acceptable compromise for grandma, even if like people like us are like, Apple's not private?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when people ask me for a phone recommendation or an ecosystem recommendation, it's almost always just a Pixel or an iPhone. I try to keep it very simple for them. I think that the operating system you're on is very important, but I think that there are more important things for most people. I think having a dedicated, safe, end-to-end encrypted messenger is a more important thing for most people than what their operating system might be doing. That's actually changing a little bit now, thanks to Windows and Copilot and Recall, which actually is in some ways jeopardizing some sensitive data.
I mean, the OS is essentially is just malware at this point. The OS itself.
Windows is going in a weird direction. I mean, it always has been, but it's been getting pretty bad where what I just said is becoming a little bit less true. But even then, you know, messengers like Signal have actually opted out of Recall by default. So you're still better off using Signal on Windows than using other messengers on Windows. And so I just think that these debates that we could have here are not the debates that my family members need to hear. And for them, I'd rather them be using password managers, things like passkeys, 2FA, preventing phishing attacks, and they can do all of those things on an iPhone. They can do all those things on a MacBook. And I would much rather have people use Mac OS than Windows when it comes to privacy if they don't know how to make Windows a little bit more private. Because out of the box, Windows is just a nightmare to deal with from this perspective.
I think we had a question or maybe counter from you there.
Well, sure, in some ways, to take the threat model analysis where you are in the, you know, the world of Apple products,
right?
And you say, well, I'm going to look at Apple as a company and take the extreme example that the federal government of the United States is investigating me for terrorism. They're going to subpoena everything that I've ever done online or on a device ever. And I look at Apple and how they push back against trying to brute force attack the San Bernardino shooter's phone. Of course, a bounty of $1 million of money solves everything, and that's another point. But Apple actually filing, and then the filing said, we're not going to provide this because if we do, then it would completely open the door for not just people with privacy conscious, but other criminals could then go in and take it.
Right.
So then the metadata that leaks out every time you open an app and share it, well, what's Apple doing with that? They're probably capturing it, reselling it, using it, maybe for targeted ads or something else. I'm going to say, well, there are other ways to minimize the risk, and you can do it like the airline industry is, where you have 4 backups, 4 systems, or whatever, and still not go to the extreme speaker was talking about.
Right. Right.
And Shelly and I were actually talking the way here about a Linux phone that I had 10 years ago and it completely sucked and the data didn't work on it.
I'm sorry to tell you, Linux phones still suck.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
And so with Android products, then, and I'm looking at, in the legal world, I'm looking at the subpoenas that law enforcement, federal law enforcement sends to Apple and the ones they send to Alphabet. And the responsiveness is easily 20 or 30 fold. The amount of data and metadata that Google provides back in their responses is just pages and pages and pages and pages of shit. And Apple might just have a single line sorry. And
Right.
the same case,
Right.
using on the rare instance, I have a client that uses both an iPhone and Android to do whatever they accuse of doing.
Right. I mean, to be clear, in almost all cases, I would totally agree with you that despite their flaws, Apple is certainly a much better company overall on privacy than Google, just from the different business model. And right, they similarly were pushing back against the UK's Online Safety Act. You know, the Apple did not just say roll over and say fine. You know, they actually took some reasonable measures. So yeah, I mean, I would broadly agree with that. I mainly have enjoyed Android just because of side loading, but Google's now trying to ruin even that, as I think Henry was talking about on his channel.
Yeah, that one is unfortunate. Luckily, I mean, I say luckily, but that's mostly tied to Google Play services, but we don't know what that's going to look like fully, but I hope they don't do anything with that because that's what makes Android Android. But no, I also agree with the gentleman in the audience. Apple is not a bad place to be. And especially now, if you have advanced data protection on in your iCloud account, you enable lockdown mode, it's really hard to beat that kind of protection in a lot of ways. So.
And what was, so you had another question?
So the question about social media. So a lot of Nepalese youth are out protesting because the government's trying to completely shut down social media. So in a case where you live in a repressive regime like Nepal, where they're trying to completely eliminate it, what would you do then if you no longer had traditional social media? What alternatives are there for people in countries like that?
I think the question is, yeah, you know, the protests in Nepal going on right now, the government completely trying to block all social media. What's your general advice for people who may need to communicate securely in less traditional ways? And I mean, spoiler alert, I suspect you'll say Signal, but what is your advice on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this is an area I'm not super informed on, right? I've lived in the US most of my life. It's really hard for me to test advice for censorship circumvention. So it relies on me having to read a lot of conflicting reports online. You're going to see 70% of people say one VPN gets around censorship in one country, and then 30% of people say it doesn't work for them. So this is a very hard thing for me to research and really analyze and give good quality advice on. But a lot of the services do have built-in censorship circumvention. I know Signal, like Kevin said, does have that built in directly. There's a little toggle there. Proton has something built in as well, where it actually spoofs traffic from like big tech companies to make it seem like you're going through something like Google when you're really just accessing Proton, and it's all built into the app. You can always try to use traditional tools like VPNs. Tor has something called Bridges, which is specifically designed for censorship circumvention. But what's going on in Nepal? I think Proton VPN actually posted on Twitter. There's this massive spike. It's like, you know, you have this very small little chart, and then boom. So a lot of people over there seem to be using VPNs to see if that works for them. And as far as I can tell, that seems to have some kind of result. But those are the places I would start. But again, I don't have much better advice because I'm not in these situations to actually see what's blocked and what's not blocked and what would work and what wouldn't work. And it's going to rely a lot on anecdotes for people in the areas right now. And a lot of their voices are being censored. So it's a hard situation.
And I guess this is just some personal knowledge of mine. I might seek out, there's actually a nonprofit here in town called the Operator Foundation. They actually specialize in creating bespoke communication tools for people in repressive regimes, though I know they are currently going through a funding crisis because they depended on a lot of US grants that have mysteriously dried up recently. Do we have some other questions for Henry from anyone? And you've already answered. Before we go on.
Yeah. So I know we didn't talk about it, but so some people make the decision between privacy and anonymity. Do you think that's the distinction between? How does that fit into it?
All right, yeah, I'll repeat the question. Do you think there is a difference between privacy and anonymity? And if so, how would you characterize that distinction?
Yeah, there's 100% a difference. And I think the most common example that I see shared online actually is about Signal. A lot of people get upset that Signal requires a phone number. There are a lot of nuances.
It doesn't if you find a payphone, actually. There's a jailbreak to get around it if you find an old payphone.
Right, but you know, it still requires that, and it's so even with the payphone, I guess the payphone would add a layer of anonymity to the registration process, but ultimately it requires a phone number, and so they're not really going for an anonymity style of threat model. If you want something with anonymity, something like Sessions, something like SimpleX, those don't require any unique identifiers to register. And so they're really chasing after anonymity, whereas Signal still protects privacy, right? Like you can register, I have my own Signal account, it's tied to my name. Signal doesn't have my name, but all my contacts see it's my name and are contacting me on Signal. But Signal doesn't collect any major metadata. Everything's end-to-end encrypted. It respects my privacy significantly. The 2 data points that Signal could give up if there was a court request would be the last time I logged in and when my account was opened. And I can guarantee that. But I don't have that much anonymity. In fact, I could even share my phone number to everyone in the group that I'm in if I really wanted to in Signal. So I think this is Signal's a good example and a good lesson on privacy versus anonymity, if that helps.
Yeah, awesome. Other questions? Let me think. I'll do one now. So I'll see if anybody else is thinking of any final ones. Of course, we always can wrap up early, but want to make sure we get all the questions answered. I'll ask another one. So yeah, I think I'm wondering I think you are probably somebody with somewhat strong opinions on this topic, but you alluded to a bit that, you know, there's a lot of nirvana fallacy in the privacy space. And frankly, if you've hung out in very hardcore privacy spaces, if you hang out on Mastodon, if you hang out in certain Signal chat rooms, if you hang out on Gasp, Limmy, whatever, you know, it's like you hang out in the, like, you know, hackery corners of the internet. You very much get some very strong opinions on privacy and the one true correct way of doing it. And I think you even alluded to, you yourself started out really being one of those people. Do you think the privacy community at large is doing itself a disservice being so gatekeepery? And how can those of us who think this is a disservice push back on those who are creating this toxicity that makes privacy seem more niche and toxic than it should seem at times?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a big mistake I've made was thinking that those voices that are very gatekeepy are the majority and treating them that way because they are very loud. So that's a big mistake I've made for a huge part of my time doing this and being online, is hearing these voices, hearing these people, because if you post anything online, on Twitter, it's very incentivized to be contrarian. It's very incentivized to be extreme. Those aren't the people that you actually see when you go to these cool events that you guys are hosting, like the people around you right now.
Well, I don't know. They could be trolling online.
They could.
We have no way of knowing.
But if you go ahead and talk to them, they're probably extremely reasonable. They're like, no, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And that is most people. I can't tell you I can tell you actually. I left a comment on a Kurzgesagt video because I wasn't happy about it. But that is the one comment I've left on YouTube in like the last 5 years. And most people don't just they're not doing that, right? Like most people just want the good info, they get the good info and they head out. And so that is somebody that probably has a very healthy relationship with privacy and security. They treat it like a tool to give them a better life. And I think that's actually a really good, healthy thing. What we need to fight back against that is more of those voices. So something I keep telling people is they're like, oh, I'm a student and I had to learn how to pretty much use my Chromebook with more privacy and how to separate that from my personal life. But I don't have a very interesting story. And that's not true. They literally just told me an interesting story, and it would be awesome if they wrote a blog about it, or they posted on social media about it, or they made a YouTube video about it. And so I think the best way that we can counter, because those voices are always going to be there. The only question is, how prevalent are those voices in relation to the rest of the community? And so it's really important, if you value privacy, if you value security, that you're also stepping forward and sharing your voice, even if you don't think it matters very much, because your story will resonate with someone and everybody's unique. They all have different workflows that they're trying. And so I think that's really the best way to tackle that kind of thing. And it's part of what's kept me going for a long time as well, and me sharing a bit more of my journey, because otherwise I think the voices that dominate the space can be a little too heavy for the average person.
Have you ever, do you think there's a place potentially, I agree with what you said. Do you think there's any place though for potentially trying to de-escalate some of the more extreme gatekeeper people, the people who privacy is their special interest, and they feel a very much sense of identity around it. And so you're dealing with somebody who's being emotional. I mean, have you found these people reachable? Because they are an important part of the community, and for those who have extreme threat models, their advice often is essential.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's, I don't know. I've taken the approach of I'm catering to a different person. That's really it. You know, like I think the extreme advice should exist. In fact, I give it sometimes. I try to be very clear when I'm giving it. Like, this is for very extreme high threat models. I really try to put it into context, because I think that advice still needs to exist. And so there is a place for that. I just think that I hate to say it, it typically goes one way. Like, normally, if you're the person giving more applicable advice, it's very easy for you to say they're catering to a different audience. And I feel like it's harder for those people to say that they're catering to a different audience. So I hear a lot
What
of,
a
oh, you're not.
diplomatic reply.
Yeah. So that's been my experience, at least. But I think that everything that people are doing on the more extreme end of things is extremely valuable. And it just is catering to a different group of people. And that's okay. So it's just trying to be appreciative of that being there. That means I don't have to do that. That means someone else is doing it. And that means that, yeah, they can both coexist, is my point.
Awesome. Any final questions before we think about maybe starting to wrap it up? Anybody has an answer? Yeah.
I do. So, I mean, obviously, I think we're all interested in privacy, but I think largely we would be more interested in privacy for everybody. And everybody's answer shouldn't be, you know, we all did VPN, you know, clutter our lives with tools that'll be helpful in privacy, but it's not the answer for my mom, for my kids, for, you know, anybody else who exists in today's society. So I think overall, at what point do we have to point to legislators and say, you guys need to force these companies to stop collecting, right? Because the data is there anywhere. China has been caught buying data about specific individuals from advertisers. You know, same with the police. They'll just buy their data instead of going for a warrant. I mean, the data's there. On almost everybody. At what point do we say we actually care about, you know, our amendment right? I mean, I know that's for the government, but at the same time, you know, if the government has access to it, they can just buy it.
No, it's an excellent question. I think the question, Henry, to paraphrase, is like, at what point is it though maybe that we are all geeks who really like our privacy tools, and a lot of this stuff isn't a solution for a lot of ordinary people, and they shouldn't even have to be doing half this stuff? At what is, you know, there's, I think a previous speaker of ours one time talked about a concept that I don't know if he invented it or just popularized it, but I know Lawrence Lessig has talked about what he calls like East Coast and West Coast when it comes like to privacy. And essentially it's about how there's the technological approaches and then there's the legal legislative approaches. Like, I mean, what do you think the role of, basically, how much do we need to like insist that there needs to be a national privacy law in America? Like, how much are these tools just us dealing with a intolerable situation and we need to actually somehow change it?
Yeah, I'm glad glad you brought that up, actually, Kevin, because I was going to reference it sounds very similar, actually. I was going to reference the Calix Institute has a really good chart on their website. It's a triangle, and the triangle is education, legal, and tech. And it's like the three-pronged approach to dealing with privacy and advocating for it. So the first one is just education. So it's a lot of what I'm doing. It's a lot of what other people are doing for the EFF, all the EFF guides on their website to help educate individuals and help them get the tools that they need. And then there's the legal side of things, like what you're talking about, is bringing down the friction points to actually give people the bare minimum of privacy. And then the third one is actually using the tools, using the tech. We need all three of those to really have a successful approach. And they all work off of each other, right? The more that people are using these privacy-friendly tools, the more that it calls into question the legality of it all, and the more that comes into the spotlight. And the more that comes into the spotlight, the more we have to fight for those things, and we have to now tackle whether or not end-to-end encryption is allowed, whether it's not allowed. and metadata protections, privacy legislation, all of those things. And then also it calls into question, how do we discuss this to the people? How do we educate people? And so this is kind of the relationship that I see happen all the time on my end. I can't tell you the best way to deal with it, but I know I feel like my role in it is the education aspect. And I know that a lot of people are much better at the legal side of things. Like I see someone in the back there who's doing a lot of good legal stuff. And so yeah, so like, and the EFF fights on all 3 accounts as well. And so I know that you guys are doing some amazing work. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say to that.
Awesome. Any final questions? Okay, well, I will send us off with Henry. For people who think that you are really good at your role in educating people on privacy, what are places they can, I think you may have already alluded to this, but some people may come in late. What are places that people can see more of your work and learn more?
Yeah, you can just type in TECHLORE, Techlore, on YouTube. There's also the website on the screen right now, techlore.tech. You can just type it into your favorite search engine. I like DuckDuckGo and Brave Search a lot, so those are 2 privacy-friendly ones. And that's pretty much it. You can look us up on any socials as well, on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Twitter, and I think that's it. No Facebook products, though. I haven't been able to register for Facebook, because on Facebook, you need a personal account to set up a business there. So
Oh, yeah, and if you want to run any ads that might be sensitive, you got to send in your government ID. Ask me how I know that.
yeah, no, we don't run ads on any of these platforms, for the record. So,
and I'm correct. You also have a podcast, don't you?
Yeah. So you guys might know Nate inside of EFF-Austin. I don't know if he's there today, but if
he's not here tonight, but yes, he's on our board. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's on your guys' board. We host a weekly news podcast, Surveillance Report. We just talk about the newest data breaches. We give you guys all the news you need to know to make the journey a little bit easier. We both actually started our own podcast separately, where we covered weekly privacy and security news to help people stay up to date with things without needing to check every headline. And then we realized we were doing the same podcast. And so we just, Nate reached out. He's like, hey, you're doing the same podcast as me, so let's just do it together. And that's kind of the origin of that. So
and where can people see the surveillance report? Where can they get it?
Same thing. Just type in surveillance report on YouTube, your favorite search engine, Mastodon, Blue Sky, not Blue Sky, I think, for that one. And then Twitter and Mastodon as well.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those things.
Awesome. Well, unless we have any final in at the bells, I think we will wrap things up here. So I want everybody to give Henry a nice big round of applause for a very enjoyable talk.
Yeah, no, thank you all too. I mean, it's an honor to be here. I love everything that the EFF and extensions of the EFF are doing. So yeah, huge appreciation. So thank you very much.
Awesome. And thanks to everybody watching online, and thanks for being a little patient as we dealt with technical issues again this month. We hopefully 3rd time's the charm on our next remote speaker, though next month in person will be the speaker. So yeah, you'll tune in then and see that. But thanks everybody out there. Thanks everybody here. And thank you, Henry. And we'll catch you next month. Stream. Alrighty. Thank you everybody for being here. We usually